Hi, folks. We're going to take on another word today, a word that I really enjoy. I've really come to enjoy and really appreciate this over the last 5 years or so. And that word is conviction. You know, when we look at human development, as I've mentioned before, we see a movement from a horizontal to a vertical position. That happens physically, but it also happens psychologically. When we're young, when we're little, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of this theory called attachment theory. Attachment theory basically says that when we're little, we're super vulnerable. You know, we're infants, we can't take care of ourselves, so we have to attach to other people in order to survive. So we're really fixated on ourselves and our own personal survival, and it's a kind of a mechanical thing. It's not warm and fuzzy. It's just, hey, you know what? I'm scared out of my mind and I got to attach to something. So that's why babies have an automatic sucking response and a grasping response. And then, as long as the baby's developing normally, starts to crawl, starts to pick itself up on its elbows, then elbows and knees, then starts to grab onto legs of chairs and tables, couches, what have you, people, and it starts to try to pull itself up onto its own 2 feet. So you literally see a baby, all of us, a human being, move from a horizontal position into a vertical position physically. That being said, we still get a sense of ourselves, who we are, our value, our identity, is mostly comes from other people, which is still horizontal. We get a sense of our moral compass, if you will. We get a kind of our set of our internal GPS from other people in our community. And again, developmentally, we need that because we're vulnerable and our brain is not well developed, and we need to stay out of trouble and we need to stay out of harm's way, and we need to survive, right? I mean, when we're infants, we attach to things, and eventually we become part of a tribe or a family that increases our survival. But the name of the game is when in Rome, do as the Romans do. In order to get along, you got to go along, right? That's where family systems theory comes in. We talk about the different roles that people take on and play for the benefit of the homeostasis of the family. So there's all that horizontal stuff. And then, around puberty, we start to wake up a little bit. What I call divine irritation sets in. And we start to individuate. We start to look elsewhere. We start to question. We start to want to belong to something bigger than our family. And so this vertical movement continues. It continues to magnify. It continues to accelerate. When we start to move, I guess you could say, into true adulthood and true maturity, there's a saying that I really enjoy, which is, an adult because adults live by conviction. An adult because adults live by conviction. So we don't take our direction. So when we're young, we take our direction from the world and from the people in it. As we get older, we don't take our direction from the world and the people in it. Why? Because the world and the people are distorted. Everybody is. Everybody has their own baggage. Science says that we only have about 10% consciousness in any particular moment. And we come from backgrounds of abuse and neglect and then our own distortions and things. So, really the world and the people in it aren't that stable, aren't that dependable, aren't that trustworthy. That's why I talk about divine irritation. We kind of realize that mom and dads and aunts and uncles are no longer gods, that they have bumps and warts, and, that our friends betray us and they don't keep promises, and, they kind of just do stuff that irritates us. And so we can no longer put all our eggs in that basket. So we start looking elsewhere. We start going vertical. So adults live by convictions. So what does that mean? Well, some people call them beliefs or values. But I say this, again, in practice, and just as human beings, I mean, people say all the time, hey, I have a value of respect, or I really believe in respect. I really stand for respect. And then 2 seconds later, they're yelling and cursing at their son or daughter or their spouse. When it gets tough, when things hit the fan, all of a sudden this belief, gets exposed to be incredibly weak and shallow. It's just something that is held in the head. Hence belief, right? Up in the head. So when we talk about a person of integrity, we're talking about a depth of character. We know people of integrity because when it hits the fan, they remain grounded, they remain stable, they remain true to what they believe. We call that having conviction. So what does conviction mean? Well, let's keep it simple. The C-O-N on the front of words, C-O-N on the front means with. Viction means adherence. And when I say adherence, think of like adhesive tape or glue. Or even more than that, a fusion, like welding or grafting something together. So with adherence, conviction means with adherence, with fusion. So when we talk about becoming a person of integrity, we have to talk about life, and about how traumatic life can be. Even being born is traumatic, but even being on the planet, it doesn't have to be this big kind of traumatic hurt, disappointment, betrayal, trauma type thing. Just being on the planet can kind of split us off from who we really are. That's a disintegration. Remember, the definition of integrity means to be one with, whole, undivided. Conviction, fused together. But on this planet, we seem to all collectively suffer from this disintegration. We drift away from the truth of who we really are. We reject the truth of who we really are. I like to believe that in each and every one of us, we have this internal code of honor. So when I work with families, that's the position that I take, that everybody has this internal code of honor, that I'm not there to tell people what is right or wrong, good or bad. They already have an internal code of honor. It may be buried, it may be hard to see, but it doesn't take much digging to find it. And if some young person or a parent curses at their teen, I'll say, geez, I bet you now that you look back on that, you realize that wasn't the right thing to do. They'll say, yeah, I can see that now. So even though this parent had a belief or a value of respect, when they were challenged and stressed a little bit, what that revealed is the dislocation, is the disintegration that exists, the distance between who they are and what they really believe, and that there needs to be a fusion between the two. That's called conviction. When I think of it this way, I used to do chemical dependency evaluations on adult criminal offenders. And I used to go up into the jails and interview inmates in all different parts of the sentencing, pretrial, whatever it is, and wherever they were in their process. But it was always interesting to talk to the parolees, because I would say almost 100% of the time, you talk to somebody and they would say, getting arrested and doing that time was the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, you were convicted. You were convicted of a crime. And they say, yeah, in that moment that I was doing it, I didn't care. I was on drugs, or I was coming from a very hurt and angry place, or whatever it was. And that's all I could see. That's all I could see. And, really kind of when you think about conviction, think of it like that. Like here you have this person who once felt strongly entitled to some dishonorable behavior. And the truth about behavior, let me just put this out there as a position, but I'm going to suggest it strongly, is that the human mind never does anything without a purpose, without some sort of a payoff. And the immature mind loves instant gratification. That's part of this wave of entitlement that's getting really strong right now. Instant gratification. So punching somebody in the head, smoking crack, whatever it is, doing a burglary, smash and grab, whatever it is that got this person in trouble. In that particular moment, there was a payoff. It seemed to offer something to this person, something positive. So in some ways, they kind of joined forces and fused with it. In order to break that fusion, that coupling with that instant gratification, they needed to stand in front of something that would reveal the danger of it. So this person stood in front of the law, stood in front of a judge, stood in front of a symbol, maybe what we call an authority figure, a symbol of goodness and consciousness, good conscience. And when that person stood before, and sometimes, and for most of these guys and women, it took a long time for them to see it properly, to come out the other side. See, because that's the distortion in the mind. It's like what was good for the person they actually saw was bad. There was no payoff there. Getting a job, getting off the dope, whatever it was, that was just, unattractive. What was attractive was this thing over here. And we're going to call that an indulgence. Why? Because indulgences are always seductive. Instant gratification is always seductive, and it works through that, through seduction. Over here, going to school, getting a job, those kinds of things don't really look that attractive at first. They look like, oh man, that's just such a drag. I'm just, it's going to suck the life out of me, man. I'd rather do this. I'd rather, sell dope or whatever, party and, have lots of money, quick money. And, and so that looks like it offers something. But when we stand in the presence of something true and good, it reveals something. What it reveals is that what we thought was once life-giving is actually taking our lives. Now we can see that from the outside. People participate in an indulgent way in the world and in themselves. That will lead to some really bad consequences, and ultimately death. But that person doesn't see that at that time. So they need to experience a conviction. They need to stand in front of the light that reveals how out of integrity they are. It demonstrates accountability and responsibility, which leads to humility. And humility is that catalyst that creates a conversion, a conviction. See, a readherence. The person re-embraces. That's what the conversion is. The person converts from being over here where they thought that the bad thing was actually good and the good thing was actually bad, but now that's going to be converted. And they're going to turn away from what was bad and embrace what was good. Re-embrace. They're going to re-embrace what was truly life-giving. And when that process happens authentically, the person then becomes a champion for what they once thought was their enemy. A champion for justice, a champion for family, a champion for innocence, a champion for marriage. That's conviction. Because what we want to do is we want to take our values and beliefs, or what I like to call virtues, and we want to embody them. We don't want them to just be in our heads. We want them to be in our bodies and in our hearts. Because when they're in our hearts, it changes our very being. Or let's just say it revitalizes the truth of who we really were in the first place. We can finally be authentic. And when we're authentic, we have integrity. And when we have integrity, life gets really good. This is the process that the mature mind yearns for. See, the immature mind doesn't want to experience conviction. It doesn't want to stand under a light. It doesn't want to be found, out of integrity. It doesn't want to stand before the law. It doesn't want to stand there because it'll reveal so much. So an immature person, the immature mind, is always trying to hide from it. Where a mature person seeks it out. We seek out conviction. We seek out, and how do you experience conviction? Through accountability. Deep accountability leads to deep conviction. Mature people, mature minds pursue this. Mature minds know this. The more I can account for, the deeper my conviction. The more integrity I have. So I suggest this to parents. You may want your son or daughter to be accountable and responsible. Learn that. But what you really want is conviction. What you really want is to have your son or daughter stand in the presence of something good and true that exposes the fallacy of where they're at. And that thing that you want to introduce them to already exists within them. It's called their own personal code of honor. That's why accountability and responsibility is so important. And that's how we become our own man and our own woman, through conviction. I question things. I make some decisions. I exercise free will choice. And I experience the consequences. And see, so when we live in a society of entitlement where there's so much permissiveness and everything goes, and the level of accountability and responsibility drops at such a practical level, we're actually robbing people and robbing our youth of the opportunity to be free and to experience liberation, because that can only come through individuation. The exercising of free will and the experiencing of consequences. And once we experience those consequences, we see the folly in our ways, and we're willing to give that up and come back to what is right and true. So yeah, that you can see why I just love this word conviction. But it is the road less traveled. It is the road less traveled these days, and but it's a much needed road. And as adults and leaders and parents, we want to carry the lion's share all the time. We want to make accountability, responsibility, and conviction our friends. That these are life-giving principles, life-giving virtues that we want to embrace. And as much as they sting us for our freedom, for our own good. And to be able to do that gracefully and proactively, is really a sign of maturity. And so I appreciate you tuning into this sharing that's going on, this reflection. And so email me with questions, come to the groups and presentations, and just join the rest of us in this journey of our return home, our return to being people of integrity. So again, thank you, and have a great day. Bye.